My apartment is still around 60 degrees Fahrenheit right now, but only when I'm the only adult home.
From forgotten folklore to hidden histories, some records demand to be found.
Over a decade ago, my husband and I bought a resale unit in a large residential estate in a district on the western edge of Hong Kong. 2 bedrooms, 1 living room, around 650 square feet. In Hong Kong terms, that's a comfortable family size. The 4 of us moved in together. My husband, our child, who was just under 3 years old, our infant, and me. The estate had a reputation. There had been deaths in the area over the years. A man who fell from one of the towers, a teenager found in the planters below. Other things people in Hong Kong know about but don't discuss openly. But I walked through our specific unit, looked at our specific building. Nothing felt off to me. I trusted my own instincts, because I've always had a sense for these things. I can see them, the things most people can't. And this apartment was open, bright, full of natural light. The first few months after moving in, I started getting sick all the time. My nose was congested and I started coughing. I was having a terrible allergy, I thought to myself. Then, about 4 or 5 months in, something changed. One morning, I dropped my child off at daycare and came home with my infant. The moment I stepped inside, the cold hit me. Inside, it felt like at least a 30-degree drop from the hot summer air outside. I told myself the unit had been empty for a while, that it just needed people in it to warm up again. But then I started noticing the pattern. It wasn't that the apartment was cold. It was that the apartment was cold specifically when I was the only adult home. Weird things started happening. One afternoon, I was sitting at my computer in the bedroom, the baby asleep nearby. I felt a presence behind me, watching the screen. I immediately turned around, but no one was there. Another day, there was a crash from the living room, like something had dropped. I went out to check. Nothing on the floor, nothing out of place. Then, a few days later, as I was working on my computer with the baby sleeping in the cradle next to me, I heard a toy car moving on its own in the living room. I walked out and saw it rolling across the floor. My first thought was the neighbors. They had 2 kids about my older child's age. Maybe their remote control was accidentally triggering ours. I waited for it to stop, then picked it up. The battery compartment had 3 slots. Only 1 battery inside. There shouldn't have been enough power to run the car. And on top of that, the power switch was in the off position. I froze. Nothing I had learned in school could explain it. Even I had to admit this wasn't natural and begged the empty room, "Please stop scaring me," before putting the car down. And just as I turned to go back to my room, the car spun a full 360-degree circle right in front of me. I stood there and watched it until it stopped. Then I picked it up, pulled the remaining battery out, and placed the car upside down on the floor. One night, in the dead of night, my older child started crying. I thought he'd had a nightmare. Instead, he pointed at the ceiling and stammered, "There's a boy, a big boy, very scary." He wasn't yet 3. It was the first time I had seen him trembling like this. I held him in my arms and soothed him back to sleep. When I went back to bed, I suddenly felt a freezing hand on my left arm. My entire left side went ice cold, skin pulling tight, trembling. Yet my right side was burning from the summer heat. I had broken out in a full sweat. My whole body locked up. I don't know how long I stayed still before I could fall asleep. Next morning, I told my husband, who had always been rational and rejected superstition, what had been happening. To my surprise, he wasn't too shocked. He had had an encounter too. One night while our children and I were asleep, he experienced sleep paralysis, the terrifying state where you're fully conscious but completely unable to move. He struggled for what felt like a long time, and then he heard my voice yell, "Go away." And just like that, whatever was holding him released him. He turned and saw I was asleep the entire time. I had no memory of saying anything. Now we knew it wasn't us imagining things. There was something in that apartment that wouldn't leave us alone. A friend of mine knew a Taoist ritual master, the kind of practitioner in Hong Kong who specializes in reading the spiritual condition of homes and dealing with what can't be seen. Think of him as a spiritual consultant, one trained in centuries-old Taoist practices, diagnosing what's present what it wants, and what, if anything, can be done about it. My friend made the appointment for me. The master's answer was simple. We had to move. Whatever was in the apartment wasn't an ordinary haunting. This was a Dai-san, which translates roughly as a great deity or divine spirit. The master explained that, in Cantonese spiritual tradition, such beings aren't ghosts or demons in the Western sense. He described them as powerful entities, elevated spirits, sometimes ancestral gods, sometimes deities, that a previous occupant had deliberately worshipped and invited in. They operate by different rules than ordinary spirits, he said, and they can't simply be banished. His explanation for our case was that a previous owner or tenant had likely invited this entity in through dedicated worship, ritual offerings, perhaps a home shrine, or that it was an ancestral spirit that had refused to follow its original family when they left. Either way, it was here now. It didn't want us, and it wanted us gone. I asked, could I burn offerings to send it away? The master said no. There was nothing left to settle between us and this entity. It wouldn't take offerings. It refused any kind of appeasement. The only answer was to leave. I thought about everything I had done when we first moved in. In Cantonese tradition, when you move into a new home, you perform a ritual called Baisei Gok, making offerings at the four corners of the unit, and sometimes the center as well, to acknowledge and appease any spirits already present in the space. I had been told that I should make offerings at 5 points instead of 4. I had done all of them. I had done everything correctly, and still, this happened. My friend asked the master further. The master said, these entities can sense who in a household is the most vulnerable, and they gravitate toward that person. He believed it had taken something from me. I told my husband what the master said. He was uneasy too, especially after what happened with our child. But we had just bought this place. Where could we even go? We had nowhere. I'm still there, and it's still cold when I'm the only adult home. I own a plot of land in a coastal district in Hong Kong. The place is halfway up a hillside. There used to be an old house on it. I didn't want to wait for the government to assign me public housing, so I knocked the old place down and built myself a 2-story house to live in. When the workers were digging the foundation, they hit something hard. It turned out to be urns, gum top, as we call them in Cantonese, terracotta urns that hold exhumed human bones. More than 10 of them, stacked one on top of another, buried underground. I didn't disturb them carelessly. I found a spot nearby, gave them a proper reburial, built a small shelter over them, and held a full funeral rite, a dazai ceremony, the kind of Buddhist Taoist service meant to settle displaced spirits. Only then did I let the builders continue. My wife and I moved in soon after the house went up. She was pregnant at the time, about a month away from her due date. Our room was on the 2nd floor, while the living room and kitchen were on the 1st floor. On the 4th night, around 3 in the morning, I woke up and saw a woman on the ceiling. She was facing my wife. Her head hung down toward her. Then she began to descend, slowly, drifting down from the ceiling until she was pressing down on my wife. I bolted upright and shouted. I cursed at her. She ignored me. Long hair, a face, eyes, a mouth, and she was smiling. She kept floating down, slowly, and sank right into her. She was awake but couldn't move. We both saw it. I want to be clear. This wasn't some vague feeling of possession. I watched it happen. I saw her go in. About an hour later, my wife went into labor. We rushed to the hospital. She gave birth to our daughter, a full month early. Our daughter is 6 years old now. We had known from the ultrasound that it was going to be a girl. But why was our daughter born a month early? And why did that woman enter my wife? I've been trying to understand it for 6 years. I still don't. I've wondered whether it was because I moved those urns, but I had reburied them, sheltered them, held the rites. I didn't miss a single step. A lot of people say that when a woman is pregnant, things follow her around, things you can't see. And what those things are waiting for is the first child. They have to wait their turn in line. Maybe that woman was just next in line for my daughter. Does my daughter look like that woman? I honestly don't remember. I picked up my daughter after kindergarten one afternoon. It was raining heavily, so we had our umbrellas out as we walked home. The rain was so strong that we stopped under a tree for a few minutes before continuing on. The next morning, she woke up with a fever and couldn't go to school. I took her to the doctor. The doctor said she looked fine and there was no fever. The strange part was the pattern. The fever began at around 8 in the morning, and by noon it would be gone, and she'd be full of energy. But the next morning, the fever came back. My husband and I were concerned, but we didn't know what to do. On Saturday, we brought her back to the doctor. But by then, her fever was gone, and the doctor could only tell us to monitor her condition. That Saturday night, I took my daughter and my husband to a friend's house. My friend has yin-yang eyes, the kind that can see spirits. The moment she saw my daughter, she said, "Something is not right with your daughter." My arms were covered in goosebumps. My friend kept at home a statue of Guanyin, the Buddhist goddess of compassion, often prayed to for protection and healing. The moment we stepped inside, my daughter began crying and refused to go further. After my husband and I soothed her as best we could, she followed us only unwillingly. My friend and her husband offered to talk to the master from the temple where they studied Taoist rituals on our behalf. Seeing how uncomfortable my daughter was, we left soon after. As I was behind the wheel on the highway, driving home, my husband suddenly said, "Stop messing with her. If you're going to mess with someone, mess with me. Leave her alone." I could feel the hair stand up on the back of my neck. I asked what he was talking about. He brushed it off, saying it was nothing and that I should keep driving. A little while later, he said it again. Then I heard a click, like a phone camera shutter. I asked my husband, "Did you just take a picture?" He asked me, "You heard it too?" Neither of us had taken a picture. My hands were on the wheel, his were on our daughter. Yet both of us heard the sound. The next day, the master called us. He checked the house by out-of-body perception, his spirit surveying the rooms without stepping inside. Everything looked fine inside. But at the doorway, he said, something was going on. Our doorway had an earth god, Tal Daigong, the guardian spirit of the threshold in Chinese folk belief, and he seemed to be straining to hold something back. The line went quiet for a moment. A disciple told me the master was consulting a guiding deity. Then he came back on and asked, "Outside your daughter's school, are there a lot of trees?" I said yes. Then it probably happened near those trees. He asked if my daughter had an umbrella. I said yes again. He pondered for a moment before saying, "He's inside the umbrella." I didn't understand. Who's inside the umbrella? The master explained. On that rainy day, when we stopped under the trees on our way home, the spirit of a young boy was hiding there. He saw my daughter's umbrella and found the cheerful design amusing, so he followed us and hid inside the umbrella. Our doorway had an earth god keeping watch. The boy couldn't have entered the house on his own. The earth god could sense an intruder, but not where it hid. He couldn't see inside the umbrella. So the boy slipped in through the doorway, hidden inside the umbrella. When we got home, I opened the umbrella to dry it, the way I always did. The master said he didn't dare come out. The protections inside our house held him down. If he came out, he would turn into a puddle of water. The master told me to bring the umbrella to him right away. That night, my husband, my daughter, and I went to his temple with the umbrella. As we approached the temple, 3 of my fingers started to go numb. The numbness crept up my arm, all the way to my elbow. The master and his disciples, including my friend and her husband, took the umbrella and started chanting. After a while, the master finally turned to us and said, "When you were on your way here, I saw a woman following behind you. Just before you reached the temple, she turned and left." Then he turned and looked at my husband. "Your complexion is terrible." He explained that the woman had been shadowing us whenever we were outside. The earth god at our doorway kept her from entering the house. She had heard my husband's words in the car that night, when he asked her to leave our daughter alone and mess with him instead. She has been following him since then. That was why she turned and left as we neared the temple. She was already clinging to him. The master told us who she was. About 30 or 40 years ago, near my daughter's school, she and her son had been hit by a car and killed. The spirit of her son mistakenly followed us home via the umbrella and couldn't leave the house. She thought we were somehow holding him there, so she had come looking for him. And she had brought more than 20 other spirits with her. My husband and I were shocked, but we were touched by her motherly love. After explaining to us our options, the master started to negotiate with the spirits. The mother was furious at first, accusing us of holding her son and trying to turn the master against her. After more ritual with the umbrella and a long conversation, the master was able to reunite the mother and son, who agreed to leave and join the line for the next life. The other spirits also agreed to move on and leave my family alone. For almost a week, my daughter burned with fever every morning, but after the master performed the ritual, the fever never returned. Looking back, who would have thought? It was just an umbrella. History only leaves us the fragments. The rest lives in the shadows. Thank you for exploring these dark corners with me tonight. If you enjoy where folklore meets history, hit that like button and subscribe to join the circle for our next tale.